Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, my dear brothers, sisters, viewers, friends of Ikra TV. Welcome to another edition of Real Talk. I'm your host, Iqbal Bana. Welcome to this special edition, and I know I keep saying special edition on every program, but over the last few weeks and months, what we've seen happening in the UK around Islamophobia and anti-immigration, over the last 3 or 4 weeks, we've been trying to bring to you issues or items or people rather as well who have made a huge contribution to the United Kingdom, both in terms of the public sector as well as the private sector. And I want to showcase those people who say that they've given blood and sweat to the UK, and all those people who are saying that, people particularly from the Muslim community are only benefit chiefs, groomers, etc., etc. To showcase, to kill that narrative and to show them that like every other community, yes, we have some bad apples as well, there's no doubt about it. And if you go to non-Asian communities as well, you find a lot of bad apples there as well. But obviously we have some amazing people in this country who have contributed to all sectors of society, take it from medicine, engineering, legal profession, etc., and particularly the business profession as well. So today my guest is a young man whose father set up one of the biggest Asian superstores in a way, domestic superstores in the UK, and that was in Bradford. Started off from very small, humble beginnings on a road which is well known to Bradfordians and to people outside Bradford, and that was on Great Horton Road. And the store was Bombay store, and I remember very well going to it when it was a small place on Great Horton Road, and then in the 80s expanded to a huge sort of supermarket type store in sort of Shearbridge Road, one of the streets in Bradford. And in fact, it became so big that they had visitors coming from Europe in coaches to come and do their shopping, because they sold all sorts of Asian sort of dresses, fabrics, etc., clothes for men and women. And there were people coming from Denmark, from Holland and places like that, who were coming to actually do their shopping over here as well. So I'm deeply delighted and grateful to have on my program today Salim Kader, whose father I had the pleasure of knowing and who contributed enormously. Salim himself was born in this country. He has been sort of eminently involved in lots of organizations in the Bradford and surrounding areas. He has been involved as an ambassador, sort of promoting the Muslim community and the business community on all sorts of organizations within West Yorkshire and beyond. So he knows exactly what it feels like to be born in this country, having contributed, as he said, blood and sweat to growing the economy of the UK, and still find himself in this situation where we're being attacked for not being good citizens in the United Kingdom. Salim, welcome. Nice to have you here.
Thank you.
As I said, I knew your father very well and your mother. Allah bless them. They are no longer with us at the moment. They had the guts to start something, and they grew it into a massive business. And your father and I used to have some amazing chats when I used to come over to the store. Obviously, you were born and bred here, and you had this event last week in Bradford looking at the contributions of Yorkshire's Asian community, Muslim, non-Muslim, Hindu, Sikh, etc., to not just West Yorkshire but the UK as well. A very, very important event that took place. But it was an event to try and bring the Asian community together, to start recognizing what they've contributed, and then making sure that the wider community understands that contribution as well. Now I know your youth was just as bad as mine was to a certain extent. When I came here in the 60s, when we went to school, we were victims of racism. In fact, violent victims of racism.
Absolutely.
Now you had the same as well, didn't you?
Yes, I went to a boarding school initially, and I had 900 white children, 3 Asians.
Oh wow.
And obviously in the 70s, the National Front was quite prevalent, and it was okay to call Asian people names. We accepted it, and I used to think it was their ignorance, because it wasn't only ourselves that were being abused at that time. I grew up to a world of listening to jokes about the Irish, and I used to always wonder why, in the joke, the Irish was always made out to be the stupid person. And I felt for many years that maybe things have got better, both in my children's time and my grandchildren's time, speaking to them, I used to ask them quite often, you know, do you experience racism anymore? Does anybody call you names? And that seemed to have disappeared. I always felt it was always an uphill struggle for ourselves to have to sort of, you know, when you went out to see a customer, for example, because the majority of the customers that we deal with now in fabrics are English customers. It was always an uphill struggle. When you walked in the door, they'd actually make a bit of an expression. And once they got to know you, they understood, you know, that we were equally as good as any white supplier that might be coming into the shop. But it was you know, something we accepted and something we had to work to try and, you know, prove ourselves. Sadly, you know, that seems to be even worse now, because obviously what we've seen over the last couple of years, and I'd say more so in the last 12 months, it seems to be a huge amount of sort of this racism coming out against migrants, against you know, people who are living in the UK. And, you know, we are 4 generations in the UK now. And what upsets me the most is the fact that, you know, people don't really know our story. You know, we haven't been given the opportunity to tell people that, look, you know, we are contributors. We're not just, you know, whatever has been spoken about us, you know, the negativity. Because the reality is 81.7% of the UK is still white English. There are so many areas of the country where people haven't really experienced life with Asian people or other, you know, people from other ethnic backgrounds. Even Bradford, I mean, 70% of Bradford is still white English. Luckily, you know, we have interaction with these communities. They get to know what we're about. There's a lot of work being done to, you know, to integrate and have more social interaction. But, you know, our habits are different, you know, to a certain extent. You know, we don't go into pubs. We don't go into football matches that much. Thankfully, they like Indian food. Thankfully, they sit in taxis, which, you know, majority, a large proportion of the taxis are run by Asians. So there is some interaction, but, you know, there has to be an effort to try and increase that interaction. And my main reason for doing the event last week was really, I've been thinking, obviously Bradford's a very important place for me. It's somewhere where I've done a lot of work in the past to try and promote the city and to try and show that, you know, there is more than just the negative views we always hear about the city. It was about really telling people that, you know, people in Bradford, what they've achieved, the successes they've actually accomplished, you know, both professionals, entrepreneurs. And at the event, we had between 60 and 70 people who were from the professional background. Some of them were doctors, some of them were actually business people. And I was encouraging them to become our ambassadors, to allow us to help them to show the country what we actually do.
Is that where you feel that we as a community have failed to promote to the wider public some of the work that people have been doing? Because they've been doing it very quietly.
Absolutely. You know? I mean, the thing is, we have these occasional award ceremonies where we will acknowledge the contribution by a few people, but that remains within a limited publicity. And there's enough people out there talking about our negatives, you know. So, for example, you know, we had a visit from Judge Nadeem, a very well achieved judge who sits in Bradford County Court. So he spoke at our Rotary Club, where I'm the president this year, and he was telling us that the percentage of groomers that are from a Pakistani background or Asian background is about between 5 and 7% of the total people that, you know, are accused of this horrible crime, and over 87% are actually white English. But nobody talks about that. Nobody tells people. You know, you only hear about the Pakistani groomers that, you know, that have been caught for this crime. And the problem is, you know, there's nobody telling our narrative. There's nobody telling the truth. Equally, we talk about immigration. Immigration in the UK is a necessity. We've got 2.1 children that are to be born in a couple to keep the population steady. We have approximately 1.3 to 1.4 children being born. So that ultimately will lead to a situation where the population will actually fall. As you know, a lot of the Western populations aren't having children anymore.
They're dropping very quickly.
Their population is falling. So they need people from ethnic backgrounds. But sadly, the politicians aren't strong enough to say that and to tell people that that's the actual fact. And I think it's important to correct some of these. The narrative has to be corrected. And I think from our perspective, we have to now take control, because I've worked with many organisations in the city, Destination Bradford. I set up.
I was going to say, you have been an ambassador for Bradford, as I said at the beginning, for a multitude of organisations. So you've been a very active member of the Chamber of Commerce, for example.
I've done 15
right?
years with them. Yes.
And you've been there with other colleagues of mine, or friends of mine, Naseem Karim, who used to be one of our colleagues, who did a couple of programs here, and others. But how do you find that after all these years, are you still having to struggle to prove yourselves? I mean, Bradford is a very entrepreneurial city. So we've got some amazing businesses here as well, right? In the food industry, as you say. For example, we got Agra, we got
Regal,
Akbar, Regal, right?
Adams Foods is sold for 30 million, 100 million turnover.
Yeah.
Tremendous
Yeah,
accomplishments.
Amjad was on my program a few weeks ago.
Absolutely. I
Amjad
mean,
Pervez.
Hard-working families, who've really, really achieved some tremendous success. But we don't tell anybody, that's our problem. I've sat, as I say, I was called back. I did 15 years with the Chamber originally. I was the director of the Chamber. Then I was called back when Nasreen Karim took over the BAME Business Committee. They set up a committee to try and increase the level of, Bradford Chamber has 1,000 businesses as members. Less than 2% are from the BAME background. It's just ridiculous in a city that's got over 30% Pakistani population or Asian population. And we need to have more representation. So when they asked me to come on board, I said, yes, I'll definitely give time for that purpose.
Why do you think it is that we in the Asian community don't engage at that level of, sort of decision making? Because I don't know how much power that Bradford Chamber of Commerce has got. I know they do quite a lot of work in promoting businesses, not just regionally, but nationally and internationally as well.
You've got to be part of a team. If you're not part of the group, if you're not part of the conversation, then you don't stand a chance of actually being acknowledged. All the stakeholders in Bradford, you have to, we have to send our capable people to sit at the table, sit at the, I've done that for years. I've sat at various initiatives. I sit on Bradford Breakthrough. I was in Bradford Matters, Destination Bradford, various initiatives. But the problem is, the reality is what I've realised. A lot of the time when they include our community, it's box ticking exercise. So they show, yes, we've got a few members from the BAME committee, we've got a few people. But when it actually came to delivering initiatives that I'd come up with, they weren't committing to any of those. And the new president has now decided that they don't need a BAME committee anymore.
All right.
So she's taken that away. So, which is probably a good thing, because to be honest with you, I've now realised that we've got to take the control into our own hands now. So we as a community now will be appointing ambassadors. We will be delivering the message. We'll be creating videos for our businesses, for our professionals, for our people, and we'll be actually getting the message out there ourselves.
Right.
We have a social media company within our business. We'll be using that to actually produce the videos, produce that message, and tell the country what we actually do. Because when I travel to certain parts of the country where there's hardly any of our community, I get questions asked all the time. People will ask me, we've heard this about Bradford, we've heard this about Pakistani people, and it's some of the time these are my customers. And it's quite distressing, that they don't really know the truth. And I think that message needs to be out there. We have to tell, because it's great for places like Bradford, Birmingham, Manchester, parts of London, where we have this huge amount of interaction between the communities. People can learn about how we are, what we are. But sadly, there's so much of the country still, when they read in the paper or they'll hear something from the right wing on the news, they start believing the stories.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously, this has been something that we've talked about in the past, that the media has a huge responsibility. And we know for a fact that the media at the moment does not reflect the black ethnic minority community fairly, particularly in the press, in the print media. We know that for a fact. And that is something that has been proved in the past by many researchers at many universities. Now, I'm sure watching this program at home, you'll be probably thinking, yes, I have been here, my father was here, my grandfather was here as well, and the country was going to the dogs at one stage after the war, and they say, and this is what, if you remember, Amjad said, that after the war, where his father, Amjad Pervez, that is, was on my program a few weeks ago, that after the war, when his father had served in the army during the Second World War, the United Kingdom needed workers to come and look after the engineering and the textile mills in this country. So a lot of people came over, and they actually kept the mills and the engineering companies going, because without that workforce, this country would not have had a textile industry at all. So if you are one of those, and your father, grandfather, great-grandfather was one of those who came here as a pioneer in the late 50s and early 60s, and you want to contribute, the phone numbers on the screen, 01274 214 299. But also, as I said, we as a community, maybe because as Muslims we have been constantly told, don't let the left hand know what your right hand is doing. So when you do something good, you keep it quiet. Now, Salim, is the time gone now to do that? I certainly encourage my contacts and my colleagues. So people like, Agra, My Lahore, Regal Foods, they do a lot of good work, charity work,
They do.
as a company, as businesses. My Lahore feed nearly over 200 people every week through the soup kitchen, with the Bradford curry kitchen as well. But we don't shout that out. Do you think now our communities, businesses, charitable organizations, I mean, Kismet Center, for example, during COVID, did some amazing work looking after the vulnerable people, regardless of what color, what faith or no faith they were in. So do you think we need to change our modus operandi?
I think it's very important. I mean, as you know, in our event, we had a representative from the Rotary Club in Bradford. And again, I'm part of the Rotary. I've been there for over 15 years, currently the president this year. And my main sort of purpose of taking on the role of president this year was to try and encourage participation and awareness. And also, I agree, I think it's very, very important that our communities have to tell the country, and it's a good encouragement for other people to also realize, that helping others is part of our religion or part of our faith. But I think nationally, people have to realize we always get the publicity on the negativity about Muslims, but we don't really talk enough about what we do, what the good we do, what our religion really means. When we say, I mean, I'm a sort of I would say I'm an ambassador of not only my people, my city, but also my faith. So every opportunity I get, I do tell people that, even the greetings that we give is about peace be upon you, and also Khuda Hafiz is, where God be with you, which is what English goodbye is, God be with ye. But the society today has lost the understanding of these things, and I think it's upon us to actually explain and show how our religion is so much about peace. It's not about taking other people's lives. Some of the people that do that in the name of religion is wrong. And really how, for example, how much there's so much power for our ladies. The ladies have got actually more positioning and more power than what's always told, because obviously the host country thinks that we're overwhelming our ladies, or we don't give them any any rights or anything else, but it's quite the contrary. So I think that message has to go out there, and we have to correct some of the myths that have been told about our people, and the fact that we're not really. And in reality, when we first came to the UK, my parents came in the 50s and 60s. They saw a community that was actually hardworking, always signed up for the overtime, peace-loving people, and we were respected. We were valued. How did that change? When did that change? That's part of the responsibility is ours. We have to take that responsibility. And for me, after hitting 60, I feel that's a legacy. I've spent years, devoted to my business. I've given time to other initiatives, but I think now, whatever time Allah Ta'ala gives me, I think I have to do some legacy work for the next generation, and make sure that our image is reflective of what we actually do in life.
Obviously, I mean, I agree with everything you've said. Obviously, this is something. My viewers will tell you, I've been saying this for a long time, that we need to up our game. We need to stop doing things quietly,
100%.
right? And we need to start showing the rest of the world. So, for example, when Bradford Hospital were raising funds for the baby unit last year, a lot of Asian businesses in this area actually they were looking for £1,000 donations. A lot of Asian businesses from this area actually contributed, £1,000 each, I think they probably raised about £70,000
Amazing.
in the end. And we know, I mean, I was involved in a campaign for Pinderfields Hospital in Wakefield, where they needed some money, and the Muslim community raised £170,000 to help the hospital buy the MRI scanner there. So yeah, it is something that we need to be looking at, and we need to make sure that we understand that we now, like Salim says, 4th, 5th generation. This is our home.
Absolutely.
This is where we grew up. Our children have grown up, and whereas in the old days,